Welcome back. Former Treasury Secretary Bob Rubin appeared on CNBC Squawk Box earlier today and had this to say about automatic spending cuts scheduled to kick in on March 1.
We have a sequester that we're facing. The sequester itself is a terrible, terrible piece of legislation. It arbitrarily cuts defense and non-defense without trying to thoughtfully do so. Instead of being phased in so that we'd have more room for recovery, it hits abruptly. And it's far, far from clear that if it's put in place, it's going to stick. So in all respects, it's a terrible piece of legislation.
Joining us now to talk more about that, Laura Tyson is a business professor at the University of California, Berkeley, and is former chair of the Council of Economic Advisors under President Clinton. She says the sequester is absolutely not necessary and must be avoided. Bob McTeer is a distinguished fellow at the National Center for Policy Analysis, former president of the Dallas Federal Reserve, and a CNBC contributor. He says if they can't make a good deal, he's willing to risk the side effects of the sequester. Good to see you. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
So, Laura,
Thank you.
the sequester does kick in, how much damage does it do to the economy?
Well, we have two recent estimates from the Bipartisan Policy Group and the CBO, 1 million to 1.2 or 3 million jobs. So last year, the economy created 2.2 million jobs. This year, we take out 1 to 1.2. We take off a percentage point of GDP. But the real question is, it's absolutely not necessary. It's bad policy, and it's not necessary.
Bob, what do you say about that? You're willing to let the sequester happen, right?
If necessary. I do think it's a bad idea. But if it's packaged up with a bunch more tax increases and we can't get a better deal, then this is better than nothing. And maybe it can be fixed after it's allowed to take place.
Well, how do you get this fixed, Bob? How do you come together and get a compromise going?
Well, I think one thing that would be very helpful would be if they'd simply pass a law that allowed the Pentagon to allocate the cuts in their best judgment rather than forcing certain cuts on them. That would be one helpful thing. But I think the bargaining power almost requires that we allow it to happen before anybody is going to get serious about their negotiation. I agree, it's a terrible idea. But it's maybe a bad idea whose time has come.
Well, Laura, you say it's not necessary to happen,
Right.
but you say there's no debt crisis. How would you describe the $16 trillion debt?
So what I would say is, look, there were estimates out there at the beginning of the year. We needed about $4 trillion to stabilize the debt to GDP ratio. We're about 60% of the way there. We do need additional revenue increases or spending cuts over the next decade. But let me emphasize, over the next decade, not at a moment in time when the economy has 7.9% unemployment and is operating under its capacity to the tune of maybe 6 percentage points below capacity. This is a terrible time to do what needs to be done, and it's also a terrible way to do it because it's like telling a business, you have to cut everything the same percentage. That's not how a business behaves. If they're going to make cuts, they think through where the returns are highest on their spending. They don't cut those. You know what we do here? We cut non-defense discretionary. We cut defense too deeply. We're not investing in education, infrastructure, training, and we're not even doing anything to stabilize the debt to GDP ratio after 2020, 2022, because the entitlement programs are not touched.
Yeah, the only
Very
issue,
bad
though,
policy.
it just seems like every time there's an opportunity to come up with cuts, it doesn't happen, Laura. So you say that's not the way a business operates. A business doesn't operate with no budget for 4 years either. We haven't had a budget
Now,
in 4 years.
Wait a minute. A business operates when times are bad and they can borrow. They do borrow. The U.S. government has been able to borrow at record low interest rates for the last few years. The only group that seems to be determined to slow the economy down because they're worried about the ability of the government to borrow are those who are fostering the sequester. The U.S. government has been able to borrow. It has run itself as running an economy which is in slow growth, where the deficit automatically picks up because there's slow revenue coming in and there's the need to spend on programs to help ease us through a slow period. It was wise policy.
Bob, what do you think?
Well, I agree with Laura that a better policy would be to put these cuts into entitlement reform and have them occur over time rather than immediately and abruptly. But it doesn't seem like the other side is willing to engage in discussions of entitlement reform right now. So maybe we need to go ahead and do what we have to do and then keep the negotiations open.
Is that the issue then, Laura? Since we can't come to a deal when the Republicans feel like they have leverage, they've got to do it when they can do it.
I honestly don't think so. I think we have elections coming up in 2 years. I have heard Republican members of the Hill say that this is what the public wants. The public wants a sequester. No, the public doesn't want a sequester. When the public realizes what a sequester means for jobs in their community, for education programs in their community, for the fact that even the relief for Hurricane Sandy will be cut, they will say, no, who did this to us? Why did they do this? We don't need to do this now. So I think we've done plenty of deficit reduction for right now. The newest CBO numbers show the deficit is going to come down dramatically in the next couple of years. Let's get to another election.
But can you really say we've done? Can you really say we've done deficit reduction when in fact the only thing that was cut was the projected spending?
Well,
we're still faced with 16 point. But Laura, we still have $16.4 trillion in debt.
Yes, and I want to ask you, Maria, what's the concern about that? Can we pay off that debt? All of the world's bond markets and capital investors think we can. I think we can. I don't know why we want to fixate on that number right now. I think you want to fixate on the issue of stabilizing the debt to GDP ratio, and I said there was more work to be done. But we do not have to do it this year, and we do not have to do it in this way.
Real quick, what are the odds of the deal, Bob?
30%.
30% odds of a deal. You agree with that, Laura? Real quick.
You know, we might blow through the sequester deadline. I think once people look at the cuts that are required, they are going to back away. So maybe not a deal before, but a deal after.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much to you both. We appreciate your time tonight. We'll see you soon. Bob, Laura, thank you.